Landfills emit more methane than all of the country's coal mines combined. When wells are improperly installed, when gas migrates around collection infrastructure, and when portions of a landfill are not adequately covered, the uncaptured methane rises directly into the atmosphere. It is, in its broad outlines, the story of dozens of communities across the rural South and Midwest that receive the waste generated elsewhere because they lack the political leverage to say no. Welcome back to Threat Level Red. I'm Charles Denyer. This is part 2 of Buried Beneath Us, our 5-part investigation into America's landfill crisis and the corporations that have profited from burying the evidence along with the waste. In part 1, we trace the rise of the landfill from its origins as a supposed sanitary improvement over the open dump, and we watched it become a $70 to $80 billion industry built on the legal right to bury other people's problems in other people's neighborhoods. We talked about who profits from this arrangement, and crucially, who is made to live with it. Today, we're going into the chemistry, because one of the most debated assumptions about landfills that the waste industry has told, and it has been telling it for over 50 years, is that landfilling is a form of containment. The word landfill implies stability. It implies that what goes in stays in. It suggests that the hole in the ground, once properly engineered and properly capped, is sealed off from the surrounding environment in any meaningful sense. This is not what happens. That is not, in many cases, even close to what happens. And the two main byproducts of what actually does happen, leachate and methane, are among the most serious environmental and public health hazards produced by any legal industry operating in the United States today.
Welcome to Threat Level Red, a Charles Denyer Productions podcast. Every week, Charles brings his real-world expertise to the front lines of America's most pressing threats. Cyber attacks, extremist networks, rogue states, terrorism, economic instability, systemic breakdowns, and so much more. From the digital battleground to the streets of America, no threat is left uncovered. No spin, no filters, just intel.
So let's start with leachate, and that is what you get when water moves through buried garbage. Rain falls, it percolates down through the layers of compacted waste in a landfill. As it moves through, it picks up chemical compounds from everything it contacts: decomposing organic material, discarded electronics, paint cans, industrial solvents, cleaning products, batteries, pharmaceuticals flushed or thrown away, and the residues of over 10,000 other household and commercial products that were never designed with burial in mind. What emerges from the bottom of this process is a liquid that environmental scientists sometimes call black soup, and the name is accurate. Leachate is typically dark in color, foul-smelling, and loaded with a chemical cocktail that can include heavy metals like arsenic, lead, mercury, and cadmium. Also, volatile organic compounds that can devastate aquatic ecosystems, and also a range of pharmaceutical compounds. And then there's PFAS, the so-called forever chemicals, which are often found at concentrations higher than the EPA's own health advisory levels.
What's so important is that we start now. This is not something we can ignore any longer.
Known as forever chemicals, PFAS are a class of thousands of different compounds that do
PFAS deserve special attention in any discussion of leachate because they represent a convergence of two of the most serious environmental contamination stories of the current era. PFAS are synthetic chemicals used in a staggering array of consumer products: nonstick cookware, food packaging, stain-resistant fabrics, firefighting foam, and they have been present in the waste stream for decades. They are called forever chemicals for a reason. They are extremely persistent with long biological half-lives that allow them to accumulate in human tissue over time. Studies have linked PFAS exposure to kidney cancer, testicular cancer, thyroid disease, immune system disruption, and developmental problems in children. When the entire waste stream's worth of PFAS-containing products ends up in a landfill and is percolated through by rainfall, the resulting leachate is a highly concentrated source of these compounds, concentrated precisely in the liquid that is supposed to be the most carefully managed output of a modern landfill. The question of how well leachate is actually managed is one that the industry's public relations materials and the actual evidence answer very differently. Modern landfills built after 1991, when the EPA's Subtitle D regulations took effect, are required to be lined with layers of clay and synthetic material designed to prevent leachate from migrating into the surrounding soil and groundwater. They are required to have leachate collection systems, networks of perforated pipes at the base of the landfill that collect the liquid and pump it out for treatment. In theory, this system captures leachate before it can contaminate the surrounding environment. However, liner systems are not permanent barriers. Research has shown they can and do develop defects over time, raising ongoing concerns about long-term contamination performance. So let's talk a little bit about synthetic liners. The ones made for landfills are made primarily from high-density polyethylene, the same material used in many plastic water bottles and containers. They are installed by workers in the field, seamed together by heat welding, and then covered with layers of drainage material and waste. Over time, they are subjected to the weight of millions of tons of compacted garbage, to chemical attack from the very leachate they are designed to contain, to temperature fluctuations, and to differential settlement as the waste beneath them compresses unevenly. EPA research has documented that even carefully installed and quality-controlled liner systems develop leaks. Specifically, EPA-supported research and field studies have shown that liner defects, such as pinholes, seam failures, and installation damage, are common in large liner systems. The question is not whether leachate migrates through or around landfill liners. The documented question is at what rate and in what volumes. In a 1997 EPA study, researchers estimated that a 1-acre liner system would develop approximately 1 to 4 significant defects per acre during installation alone, before the landfill even begins operating. And the clay layers that back up the synthetic liners are also not permanent barriers. Clay can crack as it dries. It can be chemically altered by concentrated leachate that changes its permeability. It can be disrupted by burrowing animals or by the movement of tree roots. Now, the double liner systems required for the most modern landfills are a significant improvement on single liner systems, but they do not eliminate the fundamental problem. A landfill liner is a temporary barrier between a permanent volume of chemically active waste and the surrounding environment. Pre-1991 landfills, which represent a large fraction of the more than 10,000 closed landfills in the United States, were often built with no liner at all, or with clay-only liners that did not meet even the standards of their era. These facilities are not relics of a safely distant industrial past. They are present realities, leaching their contents into the groundwater beneath communities right now, under questionable monitoring and with inadequate funding for remediation.
Methane is a potent greenhouse gas and is leaking from our landfills and into the atmosphere.
By cutting even a little bit of methane coming from the landfills in Michigan, you can actually slow down global warming.
The second major hazardous output of landfills is methane, and its story connects the landfill crisis to the climate crisis in a way that changes how you think about both. When organic material, such as food waste, paper, yard waste, and wood, decomposes in the oxygen-deprived environment of a compacted landfill, the process is anaerobic. Anaerobic decomposition produces methane as its primary gaseous byproduct, and methane is a greenhouse gas approximately 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide over a 20-year time frame. It is also at sufficient concentrations an explosion hazard, a fact that has produced a grim catalog of landfill-related structure fires and explosions over the decades. The EPA estimates that landfills are the third largest source of human-caused methane emission in the United States, responsible for approximately 15% of total domestic methane emissions. Folks, that is huge. That estimate itself is almost entirely an undercount because it's derived primarily from model estimates rather than direct measurement. But even using the EPA's own figures, landfills emit more methane than all of the country's coal mines combined. Now, Modern large landfills are required to install gas collection systems, networks of vertical wells and horizontal pipes that capture landfill gas for combustion or energy recovery. When these systems work, they can capture a substantial amount of the methane produced. The EPA estimates that roughly 60 to 70% under ideal conditions. That's quite a bit. When they do not work well, however, when wells are improperly installed, when gas migrates around collection infrastructure, and when portions of a landfill are not adequately covered, the uncaptured methane rises directly into the atmosphere. The human cost of this chemistry is not abstract. It is documented in communities across the country where the presence of landfills, active or closed, has coincided with elevated rates of waterborne illness, groundwater contamination, and cancer incidents that have drawn the attention of state health departments, EPA investigators, and most persistently, the residents themselves.
As work crews struggle to begin clearing the massive coal sludge spill in Tennessee, environmental groups are raising new questions not only about the dangers posed by this accident, but by industry claims that coal is clean.
In Uniontown, Alabama, a majority black community in one of the poorest counties in the country, residents have spent years documenting the impacts of a landfill that accepted millions of cubic yards of coal ash from the 2008 Kingston, Tennessee coal ash spill, a cleanup that sent the contaminated material south by rail to a community with limited political power to refuse it. Residents documented foul odors, flies, water concerns, and health complaints that state regulators were slow to investigate and slower still to attribute to the facility. The story of Uniontown is not exceptional. It is, in its broad outlines, the story of dozens of communities across the rural South and Midwest that received the waste generated elsewhere because they lacked the political leverage to say no. In Rancho Dominguez, California, a low-income community in Los Angeles County, a series of underground methane fires at closed landfills displaced residents, contaminated homes with fumes, and produced years of litigation. In New Jersey, the state with the highest density of Superfund sites in the country, closed landfills have contaminated groundwater across communities in Camden, Middlesex, and Ocean counties. In nearly every case, the pattern is the same. The facility was cited over the objections of residents or in communities that lacked the capacity to object effectively. It operated under insufficient regulatory oversight, and when contamination occurred, the process of achieving remediation stretched over years or decades, while the affected community bore the health consequences. And for some, such as Jim Roberts in Franklin County, Tennessee, a silent neighbor can turn into a nightmare.
They call out leachate going out the north outfall of a landfill, and that's when I was like, that's a picture of my property, and I was never notified. I had to find it through a sunshine request and figure it out on my own.
That's where we end part 2. In part 3, we are going to zoom out from the landfill itself and look at the economic system that makes it necessary, the throwaway economy, the deliberate design of disposability, and the corporate decision-making that ensured the bill for the system's consequences would land on taxpayers and communities rather than on the manufacturers who created the waste in the first place. Stay with us.
Threat Level Red is a Charles Denyer Productions podcast. For more information, visit charlesdenyer.com to learn more about current and upcoming podcasts and episodes, current and future book publications, professional services offered by Charles, and much more. All opinions expressed are those of the host and do not reflect the official positions of any government agency, military branch, or national security organization.